From a vigilante bloodspatter analyst who spent 2 decades hunting killers one by one, studying them, tracking them, and removing them from the world with surgical precision, to a man who built a criminal operation so deeply embedded into the fabric of wealth and power that the justice system itself bent around him at multiple points. 2 completely different kinds of danger. 2 completely different skills of problem. In this video, we're going to break down what actually happens when Dexter Morgan, a fictionalized, highly optimized version of a hidden killer, operates under ideal condition with every advantage the writers could give him, goes up against Jeffrey Epstein, and what Dexter's code could and could not realistically touch. Because the gap between these two is not just wide, it is a completely different category of game altogether. Dexter Morgan's intelligence was purpose-built. Every skill, every instinct, every academic decision was aimed at one outcome: committing killings and staying invisible. By the time the series began in Season 1, Dexter had already been killing for over 15 years. He spent his academic career becoming the most useful resource a hidden killer could ever have. A blood-spattered analyst working inside a homicide department. Sergeant James Doss noted in Season 2 that Dexter had walked away from a path towards medicine despite being at the top of his class, choosing instead to specialize in blood pattern analysis. That was not a random choice. Dexter studied his targets for weeks before moving on them, building full pictures of their routines and weaknesses before ever preparing a kill route. When the FBI arrived to Miami in Season 2 under Special Agent Frank Lundy, a specialist in serial killers with a strong track record, Lundy built a profile that closely matched Dexter's behavior and access, even if he never directly identified him by name. Dexter responded by deleting Marina's security footage, changing his body disposal route to the Gulf Stream, and allowing circumstances to unfold that pointed the investigation towards Sergeant Doss instead. The intelligence on display across the series is not just sharp, it is specifically designed for survival inside a law enforcement environment. Dexter does not think like a typical criminal. He thinks like an investigator who crossed to the other side. He knows what profiles look for because he works alongside them. He knows which evidence holds and which disappears. Every move he makes is built around one core rule from Harry's code: do not get caught. That is a strong and focused mind working within a very specific set of circumstances. Epstein's intelligence worked on a completely different level. He did not just outthink individual investigators. He operated within a system where wealth, legal resources, and social influence significantly limited how far accountability could reach. Epstein has started as a math teacher at the Dalton School before moving into finance. Les Wexner, the founder of L Brands and Victoria's Secret, gave Epstein power of attorney over his personal affairs in 1991, meaning Epstein could hire people, sign checks, buy and sell properties, and borrow money in Wexner's name. That kind of financial reach gave Epstein access and leverage that no bloodspatter analyst could get close to. When investigators did close it, Palm Beach police opened a criminal case in 2005 after a parent reported Epstein had paid their 14-year-old stepdaughter for a massage. Epstein's legal team negotiated an outcome so unusual that a former federal prosecutor later described it publicly as completely unprecedented. Dexter manipulated evidence at the scene level. Epstein's situation suggests influence at the institutional level. So in this case, the winner would be Epstein. Dexter's intelligence appears highly effective at handling individual cases against himself. Epstein operated within a system where the conditions for accountability were at multiple points significantly weakened. One mind works at the case level. The other appears to have worked at the structural level. Dexter survived by staying ahead of the people behind him. Epstein appears to have survived because meaningful consequences require navigating a system he was already deeply embedded in. If you want more breakdowns like this one, hit subscribe and turn on notification. We cover these comparisons in a way that most channels do not. Dexter's entire operation ran on personal control. One target, one kill room, and his own hands on every piece of evidence. The kill process remained largely consistent across 8 seasons. Dexter chose a target after confirming their guilt, sometimes through weeks of close observation. He primarily used M99, a veterinary-grade sedative, to knock victims unconscious in earlier seasons, with variations appearing in later scenes, including New Blood, where he switched to ketamine after no longer having access to M99. He transported victims to a pre-prepared kill room lined with plastic sheeting, secured them to a table, sliced their cheek with a surgical scalpel to collect a blood slide as a personal trophy, confronted them with evidence of what they have done, and then killed them. Bodies were dismembered, placed in biodegradable bags, and dropped into the Gulf Stream from his boat, the Slice of Life. In Season 4, he tracked Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer, for an extended stretch, learning the man's domestic routines and murder patterns before ever attempting to act. When diving teams accidentally found his underwater disposal site in Season 2, Investigators recovered multiple bodies linked to what media called the Bay Harbor Butcher, all killed and processed without a single assistant, witness, or partner. His first blood slide box held 46 slides. His second held 43 before he destroyed it himself. The control this required was extraordinary. Every piece of physical evidence passed through his hands and no one else's. Nobody who could later crack under questioning knew anything. The code enforced isolation deliberately. Harry designed it that way because one person with consistent discipline is harder to expose than any partnership. Dexter's protection came entirely from being the only moving part in his own operation. That model starts to break down when placed up against Epstein's setup, because Epstein's operation appears to have been structured around multiple layers of people, not a single individual. Court records in Galen Maxwell's 2021 conviction confirmed a coordinated scheme across multiple locations. Epstein maintained properties in Manhattan, Palm Beach, New Mexico, Paris, and the US Virgin Islands, where he purchased a 72-acre private island called Little St. James in 1998. His Boeing 727 tail number N9028J made frequent flights across multiple jurisdictions over many years according to flight records later used as evidence. A helicopter was used to transport passengers from St. Thomas Airport to the island itself because the island had no runway for larger aircraft. Maxwell was alleged by prosecutors to have received substantial financial compensation for her will in recruiting and grooming victims. Palm Beach investigators interviewed dozens of victims, many of whom described similar powers to how they were approached and what they were asked to do, including being encouraged to bring friends and earn additional money for doing so. Personal assistants, including Leslie Grath, were reportedly among those prosecutors had considered charging in 2007 for coordinating travel and scheduling logistics. So, the winner in this case is Epstein. Dexter controlled everything personally, which made him precise but impossible to scale. Epstein's operation appears to have run across multiple people and locations in a way that suggests removing one individual would not have stopped the rest from functioning. The size of the operation explains how much ground it covered, but scale alone does not explain why it lasted as long as it did. That answer lies somewhere else entirely. Dexter's main protection was not technology or money. It was the completely convincing performance of a boring, predictable, ordinary life. Harry began building the mask before Dexter was out of his teen. After recognizing Dexter's tendency by age 7, the boy had already been killing neighborhood pets. Harry made a deliberate choice to build the code around two goals: channel the need to kill and make the person doing it invisible. The result was the awkward forensic tech who brought donuts to the office, maintained a relationship with Rita Bennett and her children, and coached himself through casual conversations as if following a script he had memorized. The one person at Miami Metro who consistently did not accept the performance was Sergeant Doss, and Doss was widely viewed as the problem for pushing his suspicions so hard. In Season 7, when Lieutenant Maria Aguirre found a bloodslide at a crime scene and rebuilt a working theory pointing towards Dexter, he did not lose control. He fed her inaccurate information, introduced a competing suspect in Hector Estrada, and arranged a situation at a shipping yard where Lagua arrived with the closest thing to solid evidence she had ever assembled and still did not survive the night. Lagua died having reached the right conclusion. The mask code for as long as it did because it targeted human perception. People rarely look past someone who behaves predictably, files clean paperwork, and appears completely incapable of violence. Dexter understood that the most reliable cover is just looking like the most ordinary person in the room. For 2 decades, against local investigators working with the same information he controlled, that was enough. Where it becomes less reliable is against people who are not looking at his behavior at all, but are instead pulling financial records, cross-referencing travel patterns, and building data-driven cases across multiple locations. Epstein's protection was not a personal mass. It was structural. When Palm Beach police escalated their case to the FBI and investigators gathered accounts from dozens of victims, a proposed federal indictment containing dozens of charges was drafted. What followed is now one of the most documented examples of the justice process, producing an unexpected outcome. The agreement that resulted allowed Epstein to plead guilty to state-level solicitation charges. Served 13 months in Palm Beach County Jail, most of it on work release, meaning he could leave during the day and register as a sex offender, while the proposed federal charges were not pursued. The agreement also controversially extended protections to potential co-conspirators, a provision later challenged in court and criticized publicly. The DOJ's own Office of Professional Responsibility later concluded that the handling of the agreement showed poor judgment. That kind of outcome does not happen because someone is wearing a convincing mask. It suggests the protection came from legal resources and relationships operating at a level most people never access. So once again, the winner is Epstein. Dexter's mask appears to have been effective against colleagues who saw him daily. Epstein's protection appears to have significantly reduced the impact of a major federal investigation before it ever reached a courtroom. Those are not the same category of defense. What is one thing from the code that you think could have actually worked here? Drop your answers in the comment. Now that raises the real question. What would Dexter's code even be able to do against a target like this? Practically speaking, the Code of Harry was built specifically for individual criminals who had slipped through the justice system. It does not appear well suited for confronting an operation with Epstein's complexity. Harry built the code around a single requirement: confirmed individual guilt. Before Dexter acted, the target had to be a proven offender who would escape consequences. In Season 1, Dexter confirms Mike Donovan's guilt by confronting him at the site of the bodies of 3 boys that Donovan had murdered. Donovan doesn't deny it. That is the template. The method is personal, one at a time, and dependent on individual confirmation. When Dexter moves away from that temple in later seasons, the consequences compound quickly. The code was never designed for a situation where the crime involves a network of people operating across multiple countries, multiple properties, and multiple layers of recruitment, where the person at the center is only one of many functional parts. Dexter could plausibly put Epstein in his sights. Epstein does fit Harry's requirement, a confirmed offender who had already been through the justice system, and he merged with a DOA former federal prosecutor described as completely unprecedented. Dexter could verify, prepare, and carry out his process. But the structure of Epstein's operation suggests it was not dependent on a single individual. Maxwell was allegedly still coordinating recruitment. Personal assistants were managing schedules and travel logistics. Jean-Luc Brunel, the French modeling agent Epstein had financially backed to launch a model management agency in 2004, was still operating and later died by suicide in 2022 in a Paris prison while under investigation for related offences. The island setup, the financial structure, the layer staff. Dexter's methods are designed for individuals, which raises real question about how effective they would be against a network built to function without any single person being irreplaceable. There is also a timing issue. Epstein's operation had already produced a legal record, the 2008 agreement, the register sex offender status, the documented victims before any individual vigilante enters the picture. Removing one person from an operation with that many paper trails and surviving personnel does not close the case. It likely draws more attention. So once again, the winner is Epstein. The Code of Harry is a precise tool built for individual target. Epstein's operation appears to have been structured in a way that individual removal would have not shut it down. Dexter's run lasted as long as it did, not because his methods were perfect, but because the people looking for him were working with limited tools against someone who managed his own evidence. Epstein's run lasted longer and ended differently. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation opened in Season 2 when divers accidentally found Dexter's disposal site. The FBI moved in. Lundy built a profile that closely matched someone who embedded in law enforcement with compulsive attention to detail. And Dexter survived because the case landed on Doss, who died in the cabin explosion Liar caused before Lundy could go further. In New Blood, set roughly 10 years after the Season 8 finale, Dexter had been living as Jim Lindsay in Iron Lake, New York. Working at Fred's Fish and Game Shop, he went nearly a decade without a kill. His cover was identified not by a federal investigation or advanced forensic system, but by Police Chief Angela Bishop doing patient, careful detective work, connecting a drug and a pattern of missing persons report. Harrison, Dexter's own son, had already tracked him down before that using a single photograph posted on Instagram, a personal picture on a social media account, and what pierced a 10-year identity. The longevity tells the real story. Dexter survived 2 decades in Miami, largely because the department looking closest to him was the same one he worked in, and he had controlled what they saw. He survived another decade in Iron Lake because nobody had officially opened a case on him. The moment someone with solid instinct and basic cross-referencing ability turned their attention to his alias, it began to unravel. He was not caught by a sophisticated operation. He was caught by one determined person doing steady, careful work. Epstein, by comparison, operated visibly for over 3 decades. He was not hiding. He was photographed at public events, documented in flight records, and named in press coverage going back to the 1990s. The protection was never anonymity. It was the social and institutional environment around him that made pursuing the case difficult and costly for the institutions that could have done it. Palm Beach police had a case. The FBI had interviewed dozens of victims. A proposed multi-count indictment existed. None of it produced a lasting consequence until investigative journalist Julie K. Brown's 2018 reporting in the Miami Herald brought the case back in a sharp public focus, leading to a federal arrest in July of 2019. By that point, Epstein had been operating for over 3 decades. Dexter needed to stay invisible to survive. Epstein appears to have never needed to hide at all. So once again, the winner is Epstein. Dexter's cover required constant personal work and eventually cracked under steady local detective work. Epstein operated visibly across 3 decades, protected not by secrecy, but by the environment around him. Dexter Morgan was a remarkable creation, a forensic specialist who turned the tools of crime scene analysis into a personal survival system, who maintained a cover for over 2 decades, who evaded an FBI specialist whose own profile closely described him without ever naming him, and who disappeared twice from active scrutiny entirely. The code gave him structure. The mask gave him cover. The forensic knowledge gave him the ability to clean up after himself more thoroughly than almost any comparable character in television history. But the code was built for isolated individual target. Epstein's operation appears to have been a distributed machine. Dexter could likely have reached Epstein personally. The man fits every requirement Harry ever laid out. A confirmed offender who had already been through the system and walked away with an outcome a formal federal prosecutor publicly called indefensible. But reaching Epstein personally and dismantling what he built are 2 entirely different things. The island, the network, the financial backing that gave one man power of attorney over a billionaire's affair since 1991. The coordinated recruitment structure, the layers of personnel. The operation appears to have been designed to function without any single piece being essential. Dexter's precision is a remarkable thing inside the world it was built for. This situation likely needed something closer to a complete overhaul of the environment around it, which is exactly what took decades of journalism, litigation, and eventual federal action to even partially produce. Dexter survived by being invisible. Epstein appears to have survived because visibility was never the threat in the first place. If this breakdown actually stuck with you, then you already know what to do. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, because this kind of content only gets deeper from